Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Sammamish Valley Grange. I'm Tom Quigley. I'm the current president of this Grange, and I want to welcome you again to this evening. The Grange nationally, and this Grange in particular, has a long history of providing these sorts of forums for community building and for community involvement. And on behalf of the Grange, I want you to know that this hall is available for fun family events. We have all kinds of memorial services and weddings and receptions and all kinds of things here, and it's available. And also, membership is available to individuals and families, and we'd love to have you participate in our effort to sort of promote an agrarian lifestyle and to help support local farmers and to help preserve local farms. So on behalf of the Grange, again, welcome and thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce our co-sponsor, Eric LaFontaine with the Woodinville Weekly, and I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it right over to Laura, who I will introduce as Laura Guido, our managing editor. Laura, the floor is yours.
Hello. That's loud. As I said, my name is Laura Guido. I'm the managing editor of the Woodinville Weekly. Thank you for coming to our candidate forum tonight, and thank you to the Grange for providing the venue. That's a very important part of this. We're going to get started pretty soon. I'm just going to quickly go through how this is going to go. Every candidate is going to get a minute to introduce themselves. And then as we go into questions, everyone's going to get 90 seconds to answer. And I know that's not very much, but there are a lot of you, and we do not want to be here all night. So do your best. I'm going to ask that you not interrupt each other. If there is interruption or if things get uncivil in any way, I'm going to ask you to stop and you're going to lose your time to answer your questions. So please don't make me do that. Same goes for the audience. I'm sure you all are very well behaved, but please don't get rowdy, and we all need to hear their answers. This is not a Seahawks game, so. And then at the end of the questions, everyone's going to get a minute to do their closing statement. And if we have time, which hopefully we should, we are taking question submissions. If you didn't get a card and you have a question, you can put it in that red colander at the back that Tom is holding up. And we will try and pull some of those audience submitted questions at the end. All right. With that, this is actually, I'll give you guys a mic.
Can you hear me all right? Oh, good. Ready? Hello, my name is Michael Albrecht, and I'm running for Northshore School District Director position number 1. I'm proud to say that I'm the only candidate in this race who has 14 years of Northshore School District experience. I started in Northshore at Sorensen in pre-K and worked my way up to graduate from North Creek High School with honors. I actually won the U.S. Presidential Scholar Award, which was granted by the U.S. Department of Education. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud to be a graduate of North Creek. I also, since graduating, I've always been involved with the school district, whether attending board meetings online or being involved with school functions. It's always been important to me because I care very much about the children. I care very much about how they're treated on a district level. I'd also like to say that I have much experience working with youth organizations as well as pharmaceutical companies and universities who have helped youths with different programs. So I'm much excited to get to work for Northshore.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Crowley. I'm running for position 1. Okay. Sorry, I'm not used to microphone. My name is Elizabeth Crowley. I'm running for position 1. I believe that I am set up for this opportunity because of my background in cybersecurity. I am frequently in the business of crisis management. I'm setting strategies and policies to prevent any sort of incident from happening and protecting our people and our data at a Fortune 50 company. And so I am used to working under pressure and always looking forward to prevent the next thing and deal with any future needs as they evolve. As I go forward, I plan to set high expectations and look to really rebuild the connections between all of us in the community, with the board, and across the schools. Thank you for your support.
Hi, I'm Jackie McGurty, and I'm running for re-election to position number 1 on the school board. Thank you all for being here to support the students in the North Shore School District. It's really been an honor to work with these amazing student advocates for the last 3.5 years, focused on equity and quality education for all our students. It's been kind of an intensive few years, with 2 of those intensive on-the-job training for the board, followed immediately by COVID, which they did not train us for. But it made me incredibly thankful for those 2 years and the experience that it gave me. My extensive background in science and management, I think, was a critical resource during this time, and I'm just really proud of the work that we've done. But there's critical work ahead that requires experience. Recovery programs already underway and will continue through the fall, and I'm running out of time. So I would be honored to be able to continue this work for the North Shore School District, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Roberto, and I want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. Like you, I am also a parent in this school district. I also come from a family of educators. So while not a teacher myself, I am around on a daily basis. Teachers, administrators, even a teachers union president. So I've seen the challenges both through the last year with COVID, but also just in general and how they manage and navigate through teaching, through managing a school district, how to deal with making sure that we're raising academic standards. And that's what I'm here for. Over the last year, I've watched how things have regressed. I watched how my own kids, their friends have regressed. It's time to focus on our kids again. Bring up the academic standards, close the equity gap, focus our funds where it's the greatest benefit to the kids, not on flashy projects, but to the kids' education and opportunities, and comprehensive health and safety across the board for all of our kids. So appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Good evening. This chair is really low, so I feel like I'm talking up, but thank you for coming. I'm Sandy Hayes. I have been on the North Shore School Board for the past 12 years. I'm on position 4 and running again. Thank you for coming out on a summer night. Thank you for your support for public education. Thank you for caring about our 23,000 kids and wanting what's best for them. I am loving that there is an awakening of the importance of school boards and the work that we've been doing. I think that this was always the race that people did not pay attention to, but there's some events that are happening, and so people are paying attention. So thank you for coming out. Over my 12 years, people talk about running for higher office, and I always respond, there is no higher office. School board is the highest office there is. This work is so important and so impactful to our students. So thank you for being here and listening.
Hi everyone, my name is Katia Bautista. I'm running for their position number 4, North Shore School Board. I'm a mom. This is the first. Then I guess I'm a fighter for somehow. Why I'm running, frankly speaking, we never targeted public school. I'm honest. I always thought about private school just because I have a very good experience of my sister-in-law with her 3 kids, and I've heard a lot about going back to school, not going back. I'm working mom. I don't have anywhere to put my son, so that was my concern. And when we never made it, I'm like, okay, now I have to turn to the public school, and I've got into a situation that their academic knowledge that I used to have in my country and I used to be taught, they're not the same that I was expected. So I decided, well, if not me, then who is gonna go for it and who's gonna go and change it? And well, at least to try. The last thing that I always say, I will rather regret that I did than I didn't. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Lee Fry. I'm gonna level with you. I'm really nervous. Sorry. So I'm the proud parent of a rising 7th grader and a rising 11th grader. They've been in North Shore schools for the entirety of their school career, and they have inspired me to volunteer. I've been an avid volunteer. I've done everything from sweeping up after school events to working on equity issues with other community advocates and district officials, and just being in the classroom and volunteering there as well. I started volunteering because I wanted my own kids to know how much I cared about their education, and I'm running today because I want all kids in North Shore to know that their education is important. Before becoming a parent, I spent 10 years as a newspaper reporter and editor, and I feel like that's given me a great background for kind of understanding that there are, not 2, but 3, 7, 12 sides to every story. I want to, I'm at time. Sorry, you guys.
So I'm Amy Felt. I'm running for North Shore School District position number 5. I'm running because I saw a need. I agree that there's a lot to be said for experience, but there's a lot to be said for new voices and new perspectives in our district. I'm a parent of children in elementary, middle, and high school. With the change in the years, I had to think that through for a second. But and so I think I bring a breadth of knowledge of what is happening in all of our various levels of our education here. I'm also an attorney by profession and have been an advocate for children in part of that time. And so I feel that we need a strong advocate for our children. We have lots of stakeholders in our district, but having a strong advocate on our school board for the education of our children, I think, is vital. Nothing against our current school board members, but none of them currently have students in our district enrolled, and I think that's a very important thing to have represented on our school board. And so that's why I'm running. I want to be that voice. So if you want to work with me, I'm willing to listen to you and work with you. So vote Amy Felt.
Good evening. My name is Angela Chapman. I am also running position number 5. I have devoted my nonprofit career to advancing the needs of children, youth, and families. I'm a parent of 3 kids, each with diverse learning needs and challenges, which is what drives me and motivates me to run for this position. I'm also a student with a former speech and learning disability. So I know what it's like when you need more help to achieve your academic standards and success. The past 15 months has showed us firsthand how the decisions and actions of 5 people can control the educational access of over 23,000 students. We need more board members, who won't fumble in a crisis, who will advocate for kids by not deflecting accountability and transparency, and who will do whatever it takes to provide a basic education. As students return to school this fall, they need to focus on recovering academics, responding to the mental health crisis, and lastly, removing barriers with kids with diverse learning needs. Thank you.
And hello, I'm Amy Cast, rounding out this great slate up here. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you also to our hosts. It's been my honor to serve on the North Shore School Board in position number 5 for the last 8 years. And actually, this is a great example of why I was motivated to run in the first place, because of this community. When I was growing up, my father got transferred in jobs every 5 years or so. I went to public schools in 5 different states. And when we moved here and our sons started in North Shore, they all had very different needs. I had one son starting at Sorensen Early Childhood Center, one son who had to be challenged to sit still in a chair, all sorts of different situations, and they all were nurtured and developed. And so I am dedicated to helping our school district grow in its service to our children. My technology background, I'm a web designer and marketer, has made me very attuned to making sure our schools are modernized in terms of how we deliver instruction so that our students are ready for the next, the 21st and 22nd century. So thank you.
So we'll start on that side of the table. The first question is, Can you describe your involvement with the school district, albeit was it volunteering or being a parent or being a student, and talk about how that informed your decision to run?
Absolutely, thank you. So my involvement started, obviously, when my oldest son started in kindergarten at Sunrise Elementary. I immediately started getting involved with PTA. My first position was actually Reflections Chair for Sunrise, and I was that parent who made my kids do all the art projects because I just was really a strong advocate of it. And what actually was really pivotal in my desire to serve North Shore is when my older son was in kindergarten, my middle son had a significant speech delay, to the point where we were trying to get him services externally. I didn't know very much about the system. I was doing all my research, and my older son's kindergarten teacher said, hey, you need to learn about Sorensen Early Childhood Center. And so it was middle of the year. They immediately found my second son a spot, got him in, and it was transformative. He had gone from being a quiet boy who would sit in the corner of his preschool to actively engaging, being this very vibrant. If you knew him today, you would not have believed where he had been before Sorensen. And his trajectory through North Shore, he went from being lower than 1% on the speech pathology scores to actually making internationals in the DECA competition and impromptu speaking. So that's my mama's heart. That's my mama's heart, and that's why I wanted to take my professional background, my project management, my technology, my communications, and use it to serve every student and go and help this organization advance in its sophistication and helping everyone.
Yeah, can you just pass it? Same question for everyone. So.
Thank you. My family moved here 5 years ago from West Seattle, and one of the first things I sought to do was to find out how I could get involved in my new community. Obviously, with kids in schools, the first initial indicator for that was to volunteer for PTA. So I have served on the grants and committee with our Cottage Lake PTA and attended PTA events and supported as a volunteer in various ways that way. And then really, I got plugged in with the North Shore Schools Foundation and served as an ambassador with my school, which allowed me to connect, again, the PTA working in tandem with North Shore as a whole and finding ways to help all the schools, not just, my individual school where my kids were at. So I have a heart for volunteering and for philanthropy, and that is what I do in my day job. And when we moved here, that was one of the first things I sought to do, was to get involved in my community.
We moved here a little over 9 years ago when my oldest, who's going to be a senior, unfortunately. I'm not happy to see her leave here soon, but she was in 3rd grade. We live in the east side of the district, and she attended Eastridge Elementary. And all of our kids now have not gone through there all yet, but will here not too long. I've been involved on our PTA doing anything from room parent, art docent, field trips. A couple of things I've really enjoyed doing is being the National History Day judge this last year, which was great. And it was actually the year before, not this past year. They did a little bit different this year. But I've also been involved in Career Day, the most recent one that the North Shore School Foundation's put on this year, which was all virtual, which was no small undertaking, I'm sure, but it was awesome. And the kids really enjoyed it, and I was grateful to be a part of that. Middle school, I've also been in charge in helping plan 8th grade parties. High school, my couple of my kids are very involved in orchestra. I've been involved with the music boosters there. But mainly I volunteered in the classroom. I enjoy the hands-on with our kids and helping kids learn to read or help them with their math or their whatever it might be. I enjoy the one-on-one with the kids and directly in the classrooms with our teacher, or their teachers, I should say. And also been involved with another great cause that North Shore Foundations does, is the Backpack for Kids. I've been involved as a volunteer with that for several years, and involved my kids in it, which I think is a great thing that our district does too. So I support being involved in our schools.
So I have a lot in common with these other candidates. So I have, sorry about that, been on the board of, I think, almost every single PTA that I've joined. I too actually was Reflections Chair. I'm really excited about Reflections. It allows kids to express themselves through art. It allows them to kind of show off a little bit, and I just love that. I've served at 2 different schools, and this coming year I'll be coordinating efforts throughout the whole district for Reflections. Parent brag, my daughter this past year got an award of excellence at the national level of Reflections. Obviously does not reflect on me, it's all her. I'm also an ambassador for the Northshore Schools Foundation. Also did backpack, anyways, 8th grade party. And I've also served on the board of the High Cap Parents Council, where we do a lot of work on equity, making sure that the identification process is equitable. That's been very important. And North Shore School District, I'm really proud to say, thanks to our incumbents as well, we're a leader in the state in equitable identification. I think just one of the most important things, though, is just kind of being in the schools, supporting kids, collaborating with the community. I see a lot of my fellow parent advocates here, and it warms my heart.
Looks like I'm their most fresh one here in this area, because we just moved in March to Bothell, and my son, he's gonna start in September in kindergarten. So guess what? I've never been involved in PTA. However, I have a very good example, my mom, and she gave me a lot to understand that I'm important, and their knowledge I have to get in school is very important, because based on that, I was the highest in the school, I was highest in the university, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I really want to be involved in the PTA, and I want to represent that women who work, who has like less time probably to be involved with all their camping, with like helping kids, volunteering or stuff like this. And I want to be, I'm a different, because I have a different perspective of thinking, and because I have something out of box that I can bring, probably try to bring in to show that you guys, there's some different ways how the school can be managed just because I'm an immigrant. But just to add, I became a citizen last year, and I'm very proud of that one. Anyway, so I'm going to be involved as much as I can, because I want my son to have excellent grades and to get into college or university, because I'm not going to pay for him. He's going to pay for himself.
Okay, so thank you. All right, 90 seconds. Here we go, guys. My involvement in schools. I joined the PTA when we moved here. I belong to 4 PTAs currently, and Woodmore, Northshore, Inglemore, and Innovation Lab. I have belonged to North Creek as well, founding members of those new schools. I have been the legislative rep in all of those schools. I also, because even when my kids were in school, I volunteered in the classrooms at their schools. I have continued to do so. I volunteer at 3 schools every week because I want to understand what our children are experiencing. I was not able to keep up with all 3 during COVID, but I did manage to stay at a high school volunteering in the classroom, so I could see what the high school experience was like during remote instruction. I have done lunchroom duty at the middle school. You get extra credit for that. I also founded Career Day in the district, so thank you for participating. I know several of you have participated in Career Day. I founded that at North Shore Middle, and then it grew and was one of the coordinators of it this past year as an all-virtual district, along with the PTA and the foundation. I've also started a launch day at the high schools. It's a skills for life experience for our seniors, so they can learn how to change a tire, open a bank account, the color of fluids that should come out of your body when you're healthy, and North Shore Music Partners, Ambassador, Booster Clubs.
All right. So over the years, I've done a lot of volunteering around education. Beyond just North Shore, I'm on a number of nonprofits associated with STEM engineering activities. I am an engineer. I've chaired an engineering fair at the Museum of Flight. I've supported science fairs across the Puget Sound region. Inside of North Shore, I've volunteered many times over the years supporting DECA, both in prep for the kids as well as a judge at the competitions. Supported Career Day. And my daughter, having run track and cross country, I've spent a lot of time moving hurdles, chasing down discuses, and recording times in the rain and other things falling from the sky. So I've been involved, and I stay involved with my kids and with the school district. Most importantly, though, I'm a parent. And as I said, I'm an engineer. I have a bachelor's degree. I have 2 master's degrees. Education is very important to me. I'm always learning. So seeing my kids learn and grow sets them up for their future, and that's what all kids should be getting. And what's bothered me over the years is what I not see in my kids learning. The minimal amount of writing that's happening. No spelling lessons. My daughter going off to college last year and having a number of times where she's had to explain to her professor that she doesn't know something that her professor doesn't understand why she didn't learn it in high school. So she wasn't prepared as she should have. And she took advanced classes. So this limited instruction and knowing other districts are moving ahead and doing this activity, seeing these same things happen at other school districts and we're not doing it here, this is why I got involved.
Okay. Well, I'm a little bit different. I actually did not have the privilege of sending my kids to the North Shore School District. My husband and I, when we were planning a family, we bought a house in the North Shore School District because North Shore was the best school district around. In my opinion, still is. But then we had our kids, we had a son and a daughter. And then when it came time for them to enter the public schools, which we have been lifelong supporters of and moved here so we could continue supporting public schools and send our kids, the administration at the time told us, and this was a long time ago, told us that they could not meet the special needs that our eldest needed, and as it turned out, our daughter was going to need also. So the best that we could do for them was to take them somewhere else. So we did not get to send our kids to North Shore. But we have been supporting North Shore, certainly with every ballot initiative, bond, and levy that we could possibly vote for. We always supported public schools. With respect to volunteering, obviously I was volunteering at my own kids' schools through soccer and overnights and camping and everything that's involved in the classroom. And that took up a whole lot of time. But with respect to me running, this is part of my motivation for running, a chance to contribute to this district and give back to the community.
Okay. So I am a working parent, and I love going to the school and sitting in the classroom during the day. And getting to do volunteer hours like that, but they are extremely limited for me. So it is a very special occasion when I get to visit the classroom. I did it as often as I could pre-COVID. A little more up close and personal and remote learning for that. But I do a lot of volunteering within our community, food banks, and handing out food, clothing for those that are less fortunate. And so I spend a lot of my time there. Also, I'm heavily involved in our lacrosse program at the high school level, and I do a lot of volunteering to make sure that it's accessible for as many kids as possible and that they can get the equipment that they need. And so I think I will underutilize my time.
So as I previously mentioned, I was a 14-year student of North Shore. I know the district in and out because of that. And it wasn't just I was a passive student sitting in the back of the class, but I was very involved, especially in drama. I won the Michael Albrecht Award when I graduated, among with a few others for my participation in school. So proud to have that. But, I lived through a lot of the policies set by all 3 directors, actually. Many age jokes to be made about that, but I won't get into them. And even when I was attending school and after high school, I still was involved with the North Shore School District, but in college, I was at University of Washington, Seattle, and I had to deal with attending school online during COVID. And I think that helped me resonate with the students that the issues that they are facing currently and was in the last 15 months or so. I had struggles of my own, not just during high school when I had health issues at the time, but also when I was being a student during COVID, I had mental issues, as most people did. And so I definitely got myself back involved even more with the school. I started polling my friends and asking them, how are you feeling in the district? How is the district supporting you? And I'll get into that some more. I'm almost out of time, but I think that's what really motivated me to run, is that I had the connection with students that many other people, unfortunately, on this stage do not. Do I pass it?
No, just keep it. We'll
Okay.
start on this one. So learning loss has been a huge concern after a year of remote learning. So can you talk about how the district could go about both evaluating learning loss and then supporting students who might have fallen behind?
I'll just pick up right where I left off. When I was polling the students of Northshore, I polled over hundreds of high schoolers in our district. And I asked them the question, have you experienced mental health issues such as high anxiety or depression as a result of attending school online? And the results were staggering. 78% said yes. And for the 22% who weren't affected negatively, they have friends who are, and they have parents who know kids in the district who are affected. So it's community spread. And I think it just goes to show that school is not just a place to learn. School is a place for social interactions and for social learning and all sorts of emotional aspects. And it cannot easily be replaced by learning online. So one of my big sticks while running was to make sure that when it is healthy to that our students were going to go back to school. Unfortunately, we know that the COVID pandemic has negatively impacted many minority students, and not just racial minorities, but also students with IEPs and 504s. People who I'm very close with, who's had very difficult issues. And so supporting these students while we integrate back into in-person learning is going to be my top priority.
So I do think everybody came out of this pandemic a little differently, and we need to be able to understand the different levels that students are returning, both academically and emotionally. And so for a couple of ideas, one, academically assessing where our students are when they return, we cannot rely on apps. Sorry, most of these kids know how to beat the iReady assessments. So I think we need to get back to a little more face-to-face, real interactions, more frequent communications between the parents and the teachers to understand where we're really at, and not be too dependent on apps. While I recognize that we gained a lot technologically to help our students learn, we cannot be completely dependent on them, and that cannot replace teaching. Additionally, emotionally, I think maybe we all forgot how to be around people, and we need to reconnect and build those relationships. To Michael's point, help with mental readiness, making sure that they're getting the services that they need. One thing that is important to me is to try and drop the stigma around mental health, and asking for help shouldn't be something shameful. We should be willing, we should know it's available, make sure that it's just really more normal. That even if it's just a minor thing, you get a stressful day, you can go reach out for help. If you need more services more extensively, that's also available. And making mental health resources more available and visible to our students to build those connections, I think they'd be more likely to report issues or to bring it forward instead of holding it inside.
Okay, so with respect to evaluating learning loss, I believe if I have the question correct, and how to address learning loss for the recovery going forward. Evaluating the learning loss is something that the teachers have been doing. They have been evaluating their students individually all along. And I just want to be very clear up front, the teachers in this school district are absolute heroes. They put in 24/7 for the last 18 months. And I cannot say anything bad about them. They have been assessing and teaching and putting their all into educating our kids and finding out, identifying very specifically which kids are struggling and going to them personally to find out what can be done. So evaluations, yes, they use technological evaluation tools, as we all have, as the entire world has, as every district across the country has been trying to implement as much as possible to find out where our students are. Now, with respect to what we do about the learning loss, we are already doing it. There is summer school that's been made available. There are recovery programs. The entire state is doing this. The state has mandated that this be done. This school district has gone above and beyond to provide programs, individualized programs to address the learning loss for all of our students. So that is being done, and it will continue through the fall until our students are back where they need to be.
This is a great question. Coming from a family of teachers, I see how they do assessments. First of all, I know the SBAC is going to happen this fall, and I'm very curious to see the results of those. That will give us a very good, because that is an assessment tool, that will give us a very good understanding of where our students are at. But knowing all the teachers I know, assessments don't have to be formal tests. And iReady is a monitoring tool, it is not an assessment tool. So teachers need to be able to have the time to interact with the kids, and they have not been getting that. Over this last year, my son, and his teacher was fantastic. His older sister had her, and when we found out that Quinn was getting her, we were incredibly excited because she is a fantastic teacher. But when we asked where he was at in certain levels, she couldn't tell us. She said, I have no way to be able to tell. I'm trying to use these assessment tools. They're not working. I can't figure out exactly where he's at. So we had to try to find out other ways to go about it. So we need the teachers to be able to interact with the students. In person is key to this. Now, I know not everybody's going to be able to do that, but we can set standards and manage that interaction with the students who are online. So how do we recover? First of all, know where they're at. You got to know where your starting point is in the first place. Making sure we don't have obsolete technology. Making sure that funding is actually put where it's needed. Not just to certain schools, but to everywhere. Now, I know I'm out of time, so.
Thank you. So yes, we have a lot of unfinished learning to work on. Learning loss is kind of a problematic term because they didn't lose learning. They just didn't learn as much as we hoped. And they learned other things that aren't tested on standardized tests, and we may never know, but until 10, 20 years from now, and then there's going to be this amazing generation. We will start in the fall assessing kids, and you're right, it needs to be in person, and the teachers are fabulous human beings that will be checking in with each of those kids. I'm hoping, we've been doing the temperature check, I'm hoping we can continue that practice of meeting each kid at the door, how are you today? With the real meaning of how are you today? The XPAC will be administered at the end of September. We'll have the results in a couple of weeks. So we will have an idea where kids are at pretty early on in math and reading and writing. We also need to be open to where the other needs will be. There was an article about the UK when they came back last fall. They then had to close down again. But when they reopened last fall, the teachers were sharing their concerns. The two biggest issues they were facing was the fatigue factor. Kids couldn't make it through a 6-hour day without getting exhausted. And their fingers kept twitching because they were so used to being on their devices. So we need to be open and not have a prescriptive, this is what the issue is going to be, and see what kids are going to need this fall.
So I think that the first that it was mentioned before, however, I do agree that the first is kids has to go back to school, because teenagers, high school kids, I think it's really mentally very hard to stay at home and not being involved in like society and to see your friends. I know how it works with my 5-year-old, so I cannot imagine how it goes like 15, 14, and I don't want to try it yet. So, and once kids back in school, they're going to be mentally healthy and they're going to be mentally ready to go back to on track with their academics, with the subjects, with the studies. And I think that it should be a little bit more attention brought to the low-income families, just because of like middle upper class, they can afford tutors, but low-income families and single moms, they're not. So I think that it should be some sort of focus on that families. And I'll give you a good example from my background in school, how teachers were dealing with like kids that they didn't make the program. Every single day, we had 1 hour that their student, he chooses which teacher he goes, which class he wants to go, and which subject he wants to choose and to work on. It was every single day, 5 days a week, we had 1 hour. So I guess that is a good example.
So some of my fellow candidates have had some really great things to say that I agree with. So I'm just going to kind of go into a different tangent. Well, let me just first say this. I think we need to pay special attention to instruction that is a prerequisite for future learning. Algebra 1, elementary school where they're learning to read and they're transitioning to reading to learn. We need to make sure that we get those kids where they need to be. But I think we also need to kind of reframe learning loss, kind of like what you said, Sandy. I think in the beginning of school, we can do some creative measures, maybe have longer blocks for more intensive learning and help sessions for kids who need it. But we also need to celebrate the kids who made it through. All our kids that made it through. They learned something about themselves. My teenager, she had depression, she lost motivation, but she made it through with straight A's. She, her National History Day project went to nationals. She had great academic successes, even though like she feels like in statistics she didn't actually get a lot of academic learning. And I don't want to minimize the successes that our students have had this year.
A few of the things that have come to mind, I'm going to try to maybe focus on a couple of things that haven't been said, but like Jasmine, I echo some of the things that these candidates have said. From a personal perspective, I had a kindergartner this year. And as a kindergartner, all those who've had kindergarten kids, they learn a lot in kindergarten. Emotional learning, how to stand in line, how to play nice, those kind of things. So as I think of that learning loss, some of those learning loss things are just things as simple as that, learning how to interact with other children. That's going to be something that we're going to have to make up. Similar to what Chris said, we got to figure out where we are. And I think the SBAC, and I'm not an education expert, I don't profess to be one, but I don't think the SBAC's given across every grade throughout the whole school. And so I think we're going to need to have, I'm a proponent of having the same type of assessment given across our district so that for those classes that don't have the SBAC, I guess is what I'm trying to say, so that we have a uniform test that we're giving or some type of assessment so we really know where our kids are. If we don't know where they are, it's hard to know where we want to go. I as a parent, I know during this last year and a half, I struggled many times wondering if I was doing enough, supplementing enough. And that was disheartening as a parent, thinking your child wasn't learning enough. I hope they learned more than I think they did. But I want something measurable, some kind of an assessment we need so that we know where we're at and where we're going. And that's what I would propose.
I love this question too. This is my whole platform. Recovery now with the big heart, right? That's what we're working towards, and that's what I, as a candidate, desire and why I'm running. We have a lot of academics that we're going to need to work on with kids, depending on if they're in kindergarten, middle school, high school. and certainly for kids that are in special ed that have been significantly burdened during this last 12 to 15 months. I'm in a unique position. I took my 2 younger kids out of public school last June because I saw what was going to happen, and I was tired of having them on a screen. No more screens. We're done. I can tell you firsthand, kinesthetic, hands-on learning works. It's effective, and we need to get back to it. For the younger kids, we need to find lots of time to play and to interact. I do think we need some assessments and tools. So for those that are a little weary about one more app and one more monitoring program, I think we need to incorporate all of that and look at kids' past grades, where they're at currently, and put that all together to make a plan for each kid individually. I also just want to touch briefly on mental health. That has to be a big part of the recovery, which works in tandem with the academics. We have an incredible amount of high-performing kids in our district, and they're struggling too. And so are kids in the younger grades. And it looks and feels different for each student. So in tandem with recovering academically and recovering with mental health.
Thank you. Being on the end, yes, I agree with a lot of what's been saying. Definitely, Angela and both Liz, I believe, expressed the fact that this crisis has affected each student differently, and we are creating a plan in order to address that specifically. The 12-page reopening plan that the district has published references a study by the Spencer Foundation that has very specific points in terms of how to do this, how to support the students holistically, not just academically, but like you very well said, Angela, in terms of mental and social emotional health as well. So there's a couple key tenets to that. First of all, being relationship driven, and a way that this is being implemented in the district actually got started last year because we knew this was going to be such a challenging year for our students. In elementary school, the schedule for parent conferences were moved from November, where they have traditionally been held, until the very beginning of the year. So parents and teachers can get together and do check-ins and get the parent feedback right away. Another tenet of this plan is to be inquiry-based in terms of lesson planning, because that aspect that Chris mentioned in terms of writing being challenging, especially in the online learning environment, by doing inquiry-based projects, teachers get a really quick look, really fast, in terms of where students are with all sorts of things that don't show up on a standardized test. As been developed before. We also, in terms of supporting special education students, each special education student has been met with their IEP team to get an update and a recovery plan specifically for them. We did a survey with parents. I have to stop for which kind of services before, after school, summer services, and that's all been incorporated.
Thank you. You've all been pretty good about the time, so I appreciate that. Some of you touched on this a little bit, but depression and anxiety among young people has been increasing even before the pandemic, and obviously it didn't help. So what is your plan to address this and to support those students who might be struggling with any kind of mental health issue?
I'm doing a better job getting organized. Okay. So thank you very much for this question. Obviously very important to supporting our students moving forward in this. And there's two parts of this. First of all is that the fact we have to recognize that the state does not give us money for mental health counselors in our schools, period, right? So in order to provide options for our students, we have to get creative and resourceful. So a couple things that we've done. First of all, we've been blessed with such great support from our community for our local levy. We've been able to tap into our local levy in order to hire more mental health counselors that we wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. Another thing that we've done is we have tapped into King County's Best Start for Kids grant. And not only has that helped us get, that's what funds our mental health counselors at the middle schools, that grant. Also it funds screening for middle school students as well, mental health screening. And I was just on a meeting 2 weeks ago with the King County officials. They are encouraging us to file more grants. They're asking the voters to support an expansion of Best Starts for Kids, and they'll have money for us to then access grants to use those screeners in the high school as well. Because I think the reality is, we will never have the resources to be able to replicate a medical facility in terms of mental health supports. So we're going to focus on PD, professional development, for our teachers, so they can help identify symptoms. They can we can roll out screeners, pre-K through 12, in order to then have partners lined up that we can refer people to, because we're never going to be able to be a parallel system.
I love this question too. I work in the mental health nonprofit. I'm not a clinician, but I write the stories of the clients that we serve. And we're lucky to be working in the Bellevue and Lake Washington School District. And I have seen firsthand how they figure out the funding for mental health. And Amy did indicate it is tricky because of how it's funded. But there are options, and there are creative solutions that we can do to employ better services for our kids. I think our school district is behind in this area. I do think we can catch up, but it's going to take commitment and time and effort and thinking creatively and utilizing the resources that we do have in place and to maybe stretch those a little bit thinner. Some practical ideas are the Healthy Youth Survey. It's actually a free survey that can be used for high schoolers to screen and identify kids. Obviously, that is one step in the process, and then pairing them with a mental health counselor or behavioral specialist is the other part to that. There's a screening offered to middle schoolers that identify sort of the same idea of where kids are at. That is also something that actually Northshore in the past has used. I believe they've used all the funding for that, so I would advocate for bringing that back and finding creative ways to get that funded again. My understanding is we've had a partnership with Evergreen Hospital, and they've been incredible in supporting mental health efforts. So I would like to know, let's partner with them again and find other avenues with nonprofits, foundations, other funders in this area that can help us with this challenge.
Thanks. I won't talk more about funding. I think you guys have covered that pretty clearly. I think as a parent, I saw, with my kids, how they responded differently. Some of them did better than others with the mental health. As we talk about, I know I've heard and it's been talked about that we have more money for counselors, and that's great. I've seen that personally in my own elementary school, where we used to have 9 years ago a counselor that was there maybe once or twice a month, and now, while I don't know if he's full time, he's there much more often. I think with our professional development, as Amy had indicated, I don't think we're going to have enough money to have where we're actually providing mental health services on our campuses. I don't think that's probably realistic. But if we have our counselors and our professionals trained to recognize what services and what needs our kids have, we can direct them to the services within our communities, to our partners that can really provide those services that I don't think the school is probably going to be able to provide just from a financial standpoint. I think with our mental health, whatever we end up doing with that, we need to make sure it's agile and that we're measuring. I keep going back to measurable results because I think that's very important. We can say we have more counselors, but we need to be able to say that they're helping, that they're meeting the need. And so we need to be able to measure if those additional counselors are helping the children that they need to help and getting families the services that they need. And so I would propose having some measurable standards that we can measure these and make sure that things we're doing are right. And if they're not, we need to go back to the drawing board and try something new.
I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience and my children's personal experience with their permission. We were lucky enough to get mental health services privately for my kids, but my younger one, who was a 6th grader at Timbercrest, needed more. She struggled mightily with the isolation of COVID. She was super stressed about all her classes, even though her teacher said she was doing fine. So she had weekly sessions with a counselor provided by her middle school. So she had weekly sessions there on Zoom, and then she had bi-weekly sessions with her personal counselor. So she got a lot of support. Even still, she had a really hard time, but she made it through. And the school administration was great. I know that wasn't everybody's experience, but I was so grateful for that. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. My older one, the year before COVID, attended Woodinville High School, and she has anxiety. We put in the application for a 504 plan, and it was denied because she was a straight A student, and she didn't look like she was struggling. So we need to reframe what anxiety looks like in our kids. Just because they're high achieving, just because they seem to be doing fine on the outside doesn't mean they are. So just want to share that.
So my thought that it should be teamwork, shoulder to shoulder, counselor, parents, and teachers. Otherwise, teachers and counselor, they're not going to make. And Jasmine is really nice, perfect example how she was working with her kids. So I guess that it's a teamwork first. Second, regarding budget, from what I've heard, like school board is looking for some like extra budget. So I think it's like in the family. If you have some budget and you know that you have to pay bills, and suddenly you have a roof leaking, so you're gonna spend that money there. So it's like this, guys. You have just to reform the budget and to see wherever you can make a little bit tight and spend a little more money on that counselors that is going to come and help your kids. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So my guess is just to see the budgets, how it works right now, and find as much help as you can and spend money on that one and focus on that one. And it's a huge deal because the increase of their kids that were attempting suicide is just insane. It's insane. So it has to be fixed right now.
Thank you. So we've heard a lot about the services. We haven't heard a lot about the why, and we need to address the why. The mental health crisis with our students did not start with COVID. It was there before, and it will be back this fall when we're in person. So we've got to talk about it. There are three main reasons. There's certainly more, but three of the main reasons why our students are struggling with their mental health are sleep deprivation, bullying, and anxiety. So big news, we are working on the sleep deprivation. We will be starting our high schools much later this fall, but more work to come, and that is going to make a difference for our students. The bullying is an issue. We saw this year that the students that chose to stay remote were our Black and brown students, and we're seeing the ones that are signing up for our virtual school are our Black and brown students, and it's about bullying. So we have work to do in our community to make sure that all students feel safe and welcome and respected. And the anxiety is a huge conversation that I think we need to have that we are not discussing, is why do our students feel so anxious? Why do we put so much pressure, and what can we do about it?
So depression and anxiety, those are real things. And last year, about this time, my daughter will remember the moment I picked up my phone and wrote a post on Facebook about one of my academy classmates who, Air Force Academy graduate, fighter pilot, vice president at one of the investment banks, highly successful, smile from ear to ear all the time. If he walked in this room, the positive energy that would flow over this room immediately would be incredible. But he was fighting depression, and the isolation that came with COVID was too much, and he took his life. It's the isolation, it's the pulling away has made this worse than it ever has been. Yes, the mental health issues are there. They always will be. But it's the interactions, it's the time we spend with those people. I've had close interactions with people over the last year that I saw were on a downhill slide. And that interaction, I went, sat down with them and asked what was going on, tried to get them help. That's turned it around. That's what we need. I agree with teachers. They're our first line of defense against this. They see the kids each and every day. They watch their behaviors. They see the change in behaviors. But we need the mental health experts, and we need to find the funding for it. Maybe instead of putting a very expensive artificial turf field in at Maywood Heights, we can do with something a little bit better, a little that's better than what they have, but spend that money elsewhere, like what Katya was saying. Put the money where it's needed. District pool sounds great. As an athlete, I love the idea, but I can find a lot better uses, especially when we have this mental health crisis. Let's put the money where it's needed so we can get those professionals. I come from a family with mental health professionals. They're the second line of defense needed.
Okay, shoot. Well, there's been a whole lot said already that I have here on my notes to talk about, so I don't think I want to go through all of that. But as I think was mentioned, mental health crises and even the teen suicide rates were going up just exponentially for years before COVID hit. And of course, COVID exacerbated all of that. Didn't cause it, but I think it also led to it in a number of people who perhaps would not have been susceptible to it before. Prior to COVID, again, this board and our Northshore administration saw what was going on and proactively started advocating very strongly with our legislatures to please start funding mental health counselors, more counselors in our schools. It's desperately needed. And like was mentioned, I think also we've found creative ways to try to do it ourselves, shuffling funds around so that we could find it for all of the mental health counselors and nurses that we have put in place over this last year. And also partnered with Evergreen and gone out for grants and funding to provide even more. It's going to take a village. Professional development for the teachers to recognize things in their students, some instruction for students to recognize it in themselves and each other, and a trusted adult at every school that every child knows they can go to for help.
Okay, first, I'm going to trust that you remember what I said in my last answer. Second, there has been a lot of amazing things said already. I wholeheartedly agree that the efforts with the PD and our teachers as our first line of detection is imperative. And anytime we can prevent things from escalating to a serious or self-harm situation, we need to be educated and prepared to do that. For sure. To take a little bit of a different angle, I think one thing that I'd like to look at is the extracurricular activities and the accessibility of those activities. This is a little bit of a lighter area here, but since some of this has been well covered, I think those interactions for our children to have outside of the pressure of the academics is an outlet for them to help with their mental health, build those relationships, allow them to support each other, right? The team bonding that you see in sports, that's friendship for life. And you see that kids will go and they will help each other and they will recognize when their teammate is having a struggle. And so I think making sure that all of those extracurricular activities are accessible to our students and that they have those opportunities to build those connections is very helpful.
So as I previously said, in my polling, 78% of children have had very difficult issues associated with online school. And it's not just me saying that, but King County has released a statistic saying that there's been a 30% increase in youth suicide over the course of the pandemic. So this is definitely an issue, and I have many solutions for this issue. First, doesn't take much money, if any, but what Dr. Michelle Reed said in a May 2021 school board meeting was that it's important that people know about the services we already provide. I was a student in the district, obviously, and sometimes I found it difficult to find help that I needed. So just letting people know about what we already provide can go help people leaps and bounds. Another is making sure that there's counselors in all of our 35 schools and choice programs. We got 20 elementary schools, 6 middle schools, 4 high schools, 5 choice schools. I'd like all of them to have at least one mental health counselor that someone can go to and talk to, okay? A K through 12 mental health curriculum. Obviously, there's been a lot said about sex ed over the course of the last couple of years. I'd like to see a mental health curriculum from kindergarten to 12th grade. And I believe Cass said it. It was a little while ago, but we have many partnerships. And so I'd like to see expanded partnerships because these organizations like the YMCA and churches and such are much better equipped to handle because our students' needs because they just have more experience with it. Not to put any of you down, of course, but they just have more people to help us with. So outreach is a big part of that.
All right, we're about halfway through. We're gonna take like 2 or 3 minutes so that anyone needs to go to the bathroom, they're in the back. Or if you need a cookie or some coffee, please be quick. It looks like most people are pretty settled. Good job. That was a good job coming back together. All right. So moving on. With any kind of board, whether it be school board or any kind of government group, transparency and trust and communication are definitely important things. It's something that's come up a lot, especially in the last year. How could the school board improve its communication with the community and improve the perception of transparency?
I think the board has done a lot of good things to try to have some community outreach, but unfortunately they've had a lot of pitfalls as well. One of which is that a couple years ago, the voters generously passed a technology tax levy. And it wasn't a cheap one either. It raised millions and millions of dollars. And the voters at the time were under the assumption that the majority of it, given that it's a technology levy, would go towards technology. But unfortunately for the voters, they weren't told that only approximately 3% of that money would go towards student devices. A lot of those devices were actually out of warranty. And so a lot of students had issues with technology during time of COVID. And so I know the school district has apologized for a lot of that, but I think as we look forward into the future, we got to make sure that these issues don't happen again. And I'm sorry to say, but it's hard to have faith in someone who has previously made you mistrust them by passing budgets without seemingly much consideration. I mean, I believe it was, I know for sure, at least 10 times more money went towards teacher training for Zoom than it did for student devices. So transparency with financial information it's so easy to do. I'm surprised. You'll be so surprised with how good I am at it.
Give me a second to recover from that. Okay. Well, first, I'm just going to say about myself, transparency is one of the things that's most important to me, and building trust. It's just so important to have that honest relationship, be open to criticism and feedback, and always willing to get better. And so that's something that I embody personally and would bring to the board. As far as improving communications to our community, I think COVID obviously made it hard. Right? They took away the personal aspect of it, and for me personally, the communication felt very cold and sort of stoic, right? And when in an emotional crisis, I want to know you have compassion, but when you're on video or all the communication is written, you lose that piece. So hopefully now that the state's at 70% vaccination rate, we can be in person and we can rebuild the FaceTime and get out. I would like to see more opportunities for our community to provide feedback. We were just talking actually during the break about how we'd like to see more people attending the school board meetings and bring a voice, during the public comment. There's a lot of angst in the community, and that is one vector where we can raise that voice. And the board needs to listen and respond to that. But I think that there needs to be additional opportunities for that FaceTime, both in the schools for parents, but also for the taxpayers and the community.
Where to start? So the last year has been a little difficult with respect to transparency and communication. I know from my experience on the board, every possible medium for communicating to the public has been used and tried. I mean, it clearly doesn't always get through, but we've tried everything we can think of. Perhaps there are other ways that we could use, and perhaps we need to be more aggressive about, blasting messages and hope that will get people's attention a little bit. Having to go through this time with masks on makes it a little hard for people to see your face and what you're doing and thinking. There also seem to be some misconceptions about what we're allowed to do during board meetings. There is public comment, but the agenda is what the agenda is, and only the president speaks for the board. So we're somewhat limited in being able to, express our own emotions and have that interaction. The one thing that I would like to see us do is have more of the conversations with the board, more opportunities that we almost completely lost over the last 18 months to meet with parents out in the field, if you will. Now, historically, there have not been very many people who've attended these. Hopefully that will change and increase, and if we can have more of those, I think it will build that, rebuild the level of communication and trust that we need.
So during my day job, I work with customers around the world. And over the last year especially, it's been really hard because normally my team or myself would be going out and meeting with them face to face, spending that time in a room with them, taking them out to dinner. But obviously we couldn't do that over the last year. Borders are closed, everybody's locked down, stuck in their homes. But yet I've received compliments time and time again from my customers about my team, about appreciating the transparency that they have with us. And why is that? It's not just sharing the good news, it's telling them the bad news. When something bad happens, someone on my team will come to me and say, hey, did you hear about this? We got to figure out what we're going to do. And my first question to them is, have you called your customer yet? Get on the phone with them. Let them know what's going on. Let them know we don't have an answer, but let them know we're working it. They can always trust us to tell them the good and the bad. And that's what I expect. That's how I do things. And that's what I'd be doing here. Having that communication, having that face-to-face conversation. I'm elected by you. That means I represent you. I need to be able to hear you, and I'm going to spend that time listening to you and talking to you. That also means that, I'm going to share my opinions. I'm going to tell you why I believe we should go a certain direction, why the board should go a certain direction. We're going to share that. Or why we made a certain decision. And we may not agree with it, but at least we'll know where we both stand. That's how we'll build that openness and transparency. Zoom hours, town halls, conversations with the board, FaceTime, things like that.
Thank you. For 12 years, this is always a question, and many iterations of the board and superintendents. It's a constant, and part of it is because the forms of communication have evolved over the years, and the size of the district has grown. So I attended a professional development class on communicating in a crisis for a school board member years ago, way prior to COVID, and they talked about, because of our instant communication, the challenges when you're trying to understand the situation, but people are demanding information from you, but you don't have all the facts yet. And that's in a static situation, an earthquake or a tornado or whatever, where it happened and then it's done. We had an ongoing crisis where the facts and the information kept changing and trying to communicate what we knew continuously. So it was a learning. We have more learning to do. We will continue to work on that. It is a forever conversation, we know, and we will always be working on listening and learning and making sure that we're getting the best information that we have at the moment out.
To me, school board is a bridge between parents and teachers, which means that it's a team work, and it has to be heard by parents, not only the vocal parents, but also the quiet one, who just probably don't have time to be involved in all of discussion because they're working to pay taxes, so to support the school, Northshore School District. And I think that it has to be a little bit more involvement and bringing parents, the one that have really critical questions, because guys, we got tons of questions, very strong one that we have to answer, and I haven't seen that these questions were addressed to the school board. And my guess, it was a little bit of like kind of filtration. We want to answer this one, we don't want to answer that one. And has to be a little bit more transparent. The second one is the time where the school board meeting are. It's Monday 5 p.m. or in another Monday is like also 7 p.m. something like this. But Monday 5 p.m. guys, really, it's really tough to make it, even if it's a Zoom meeting. I'm driving, I'm on the freeway, and I cannot listen everything whatever like parents or school board is talking about. And the last one is a budget. I went to the website to find how the budget was spent. I was not looking for plans. I was looking how the budget was spent. I would tell you I didn't find this information. So transparency, because I'm an engineer, I need numbers.
So I agree. I value transparency. With me, what you see is what you get. I have no ulterior motives or anything. I'm gonna answer any question that comes my way to the best of my ability, and I would continue to do that if elected. When it comes to communication, I do realize that there are laws that prevent certain types of communication for school board members and with the community. And I think it's worth getting a second opinion about some of the restrictions that are in place. I'm not an attorney like Amy here, but I think there's different ways to interpret the law, and maybe there is a way that there can be more interaction, there can be better flow of communication. And although public speaking is not my forte, but communication is something I'm really good at. And I think we need to also seek input from people who don't know to give input. We have a lot of people in our community. We, I think, have 93 languages spoken. Not everyone is going to know to come to a meeting. Not everyone is going to know who they can talk to get things done for their kids. So we need to do a little more reaching out.
Thank you. There's a couple things that have come to mind. As an attorney, one of the things that drives me crazy is when a question's asked and it's not answered, and it's not answered directly. And I've seen a lot of that in the last year and a half. And I want to separate. There's communications that come from our superintendent, and there's communications that come from the board. And I think, as my husband and I spoke during this last year and a half, a lot of the communications we were getting from our superintendent had a lot of fluff in them and not a lot of information that we as parents wanted. And that was troubling to me. I wanted to know, not that the tragedies around the world are not important, but I wanted to hear about the tragedy unfolding here in our own school district. And I wanted to know what we were doing as a school district to address those and have it be more clear and transparent as a parent. I don't know about you, but I have 50 to 60 emails a day that I'm trying to go through. So if I've got to read multiple paragraphs to try to glean what's being communicated, I'm going to stop reading, and I think most parents will too. And so I would work with, as a board member, I think you're instituting policy. You're trying to work with the superintendent, who's the CEO. And so if that communication from her is not coming down the pipe right, I think it's a responsibility of the board member to work to improve that. The transparency with the board, I think we need to be more accessible. 5 p.m. Time with the board is not a convenient time, and answering emails and responding to telephone calls, while probably inconvenient sometimes, helps your community know that you're in touch and that you care.
Those are good answers, Amy, and I agree. The few things that I would add to this is there's no doubt that there is difficulty as a board of 5 communicating and being transparent. And I'll iterate some highlights that I've heard and maybe add to that. It should take 2 minutes to get on the board website and figure out how to attend, if there's space, and what else you need to know. Accessing the legislative priorities, the budget, the agenda. It should not take a PhD to figure that out. Lake Washington and Bellevue, you can find all of that in 2 minutes. Plus, when you sign up to attend a board meeting, you get a reminder, you get the agenda, you get a link. We have areas that we can improve. I'm in donor relations. The first thing a board member can do when someone shows up to a meeting, thank you for coming. Why are you here tonight? They need to get down from the dais and get to know who is there and why, and acknowledge them. There is nothing stopping them from shaking their head or nodding when a parent makes a public comment, when a student says they have an issue and they want the board to address them and to see them and to hear them. There is no rule saying they can do that. Absolutely, the board president can do more to encourage these basic human acknowledgements. I'll also add access to in-person and virtual. We need to make both always.
Thanks, Angela. And I have to say, I'll start out, I totally agree. We have to keep the virtual access to public comment and board meetings. I think that was a great addition. We got a change in guidance from the governor and we pivoted, but it's been my request that we absolutely do that. I have to say, I agree 100% that communications from the board and to the board during the crisis, it was a struggle. It was a struggle. We made a commitment to keep our conversations with the board in a virtual method so we could at least still keep that going. The first time we had it in January, we got feedback that the format was frustrating. We changed it in March to another way. We got feedback the format was frustrating. We really struggled. We tried really hard to do that. Even our letter at the end of March confirming that we were committed to coming back for full-time in person in September was really confusing to people. And I took a lot of time to think about why that might have been. And I think a core of the problem is that we're in such a crisis that it touches so many deep parts of us, especially when we worry about our children who are so precious to us. And what kept happening, the updates, we got over, it was 57 changed guidelines from OSPI, that's the Office of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, 57, time and time again. And so we had to take this very technical information, try to translate it out so people would understand it, and then do it all over again. And we didn't do a good job of it, I'll be honest. And so our default as a board has been to go out and seek people. You should never expect that people are going to come to you with community engagement. And we couldn't do that during COVID either, because for obvious reasons. So I agree, and I got points.
There has been a lot of discussion, both nationally and within the North Shore School District, about racism and its historical context, its contemporary context, and how that fits into the school curriculum. How do you think North Shore should address this issue in its schools?
Within curriculum, okay. I'll say personally, my approach to serving each and every student within North Shore is that it should not be a statistical predictor based on a student's circumstance or characteristic or identity, their outcomes in our district. And unfortunately, that's true. And how you work with that is two-pronged. First of all, there's work the adults have to do. There's work the adults have to do in terms of removing barriers to access, which is something that Jasmine talked about. For too long, there were a lot of presumptions made in terms of how students should be able to access all the different rainbow varieties of programs within North Shore, that we had to take a step back and peel away those barriers to access. And the other one is climate. I have to say, I had to sit through in a way that I don't know if you weren't on the board that you would understand, a 2.5-hour board meeting where family after family and child after child who were in our district came up and talked about how they experienced racism within North Shore, 2015. Racial epithets, how staff treated them, and it's impossible not to want to do something to change the climate. In terms of curriculum, you have to have curriculum that reflects the diversity of your community. In terms of adding books, adding conversations about historical events that impact different students in our community than others. That's how you start to address the climate issues.
Okay, game on. This is like speed dating, by the way. The board obviously sets the policy, right? We're not the ones administering it. That's up to the administration and the teachers. And regardless of whether it's equity, diversion, not diversion, equity, inclusion, diversity, anti-racism, there absolutely needs to be a curriculum because there needs to be a guide and a standard and how we're going to measure that. To do it loosey-goosey, whatever you want, I'm going to apply my own impression. That's not going to work. That's not the job of the school district. The job of the school district is teaching academics and in this coming year, bridging that gap. Obviously, we need to focus on the needs of students, and there are quite a variety of them based off of who you are and your makeup and what your experience has been. So I guess I would say as a future board member is that we set the policy. And so that is up to the board members to really nail that and get it right for the administrators and the teachers. And it starts with curriculum.
And I echo Angela on that. We have to have a curriculum, and it's got to be clear. It's got to be measurable. Again, I go back to the measurable. How do we know? I guess let me back up. First, we have to know what our goal is when we talk about any curriculum, whether it's equity, math, reading, whatever. What's our goal? How are we going to measure it? And then what tools are we going to give our teachers so that it's very clear to them so that we don't have teachers looking for resources outside of our district? We need to have clear curriculum across the whole district. And that's something that as I've endeavored on this campaign that I've realized is we don't necessarily have a standard curriculum for across all of our schools. And that's troubling for me because that's an equity issue. What one kid gets in one school isn't getting it in another. So it needs to be a clear curriculum. Those tools need to be available to our teachers. They need to have it modeled for them so that they can then go into the classroom and model it for our students. Without a clear curriculum, again, whether it's equity, racism curriculum, and as far as I understand, while we are working on an equity curriculum, we do not currently have a racial equity curriculum. And so I think some of the things that happen is that breeds fear in our parents, because as a parent, I want to know what a curriculum is going to look like. And if I can't go in there, we're leaving it up to teachers to decide that for themselves. And I think as a parent, that's very troubling and part of why we have such the excitement around this at this time. So clear curriculum, we know what it is, we can look at it.
Okay, you guys, real talk. 40 years ago, I started school. I was the first Asian student to enroll in my school district. I faced racism on a near daily basis. It's still going on today. 40 years later, it's not acceptable. You know, I totally agree we need to have a clear curriculum, but our children of color, there has been nothing preventing teachers from going rogue for 150 years in public schools, and teaching them harmful things, teaching them inaccurate things. You guys are right. We need a clear and appropriate curriculum, and we need it yesterday. Just having policies in place isn't enough. We have great policies in place in this district. I love what the district has to say about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but our children of color, they're not reaping the benefits of those policies. And so we need to look further than policies. We need to dig deep. It's uncomfortable to talk about race. It's uncomfortable to talk about racism, but it will benefit everybody, the community, our children, if we address this head on and address it immediately.
Tough question. I'm from the multi-family. I mean nationality, because you can see my husband, he's Mexican. And it's pretty tough question just because of the way it's being brought from teachers with their subjective opinions to the kids. And I guess it has to be a specific curriculum and even rules, what you have to bring, what you're not allowed to bring. Because I will give a very fast example. if I'm from Belarus and we have a lot of opposition these days going on and a lot of people getting in trouble. So we had a teacher. He used to taught us history. He was in opposition. He never brought his own opinion about what's going on in the country. Just to make sure that we have critical thinking, he was giving us different books. He was giving us different sources. So at the end, some kids, they decided to think this way, another one this way. So what I see right now, it's a lot of subjective opinion that has to be some sort of regulated, and I think that parents have to be involved, but not the unions, and teachers has to bring this down to whatever has to be taught in the school, because we're taxpayers, we are paying for this one and for their salaries.
So my family is also from Belarus. They came here about 120 years ago, my great-grandparents. The family that stayed behind were put in cattle cars and sent to Treblinka. And I have no family left in Belarus. In fact, the villages they live in don't exist anymore. Their history has been wiped clean from Belarus. We have students that when they go to history, their history is not part of the curriculum. Their families are not part of our story. When they are in English, they are not reading about characters that share the way they look and the way they think and who they are. We need to include these in our work so that all of our students feel valued, they feel respected, and are treated with dignity, and that we do not lose their histories.
So Jasmine said that racism's still going on today, and I can guarantee it is. Yeah, I sit here as an average white guy, but a couple years ago, I worked for a boss, fantastic leader, Air Force Academy grad as well, and he was minority. And watching how his peers interacted with him, how they treated him, how they talked to him, how they ignored him, even though he was more successful, he was producing more business results than they could. It was all because of who he was, and it was absurd. It was really embarrassing to watch this happen. I agree with Angela and Amy and what everybody said about a curriculum. We need to have that defined as far as what that is and what it is not. But the key, in my mind, is holding people accountable to no tolerance of racism. My daughter had a number of friends who were of different ethnicities, and I love traveling the world and learning about all the different ethnicities and cultures. It's fantastic. And yes, I agree with bringing that into the schools. That's part of growing a global student. But when her friends are walking down the hallway and having ethnic and racial slurs thrown at them, but then nobody is doing anything about it, that's absurd. That's allowing and tolerating racism. So we can talk about building a curriculum, but first and foremost, we got to stop tolerating it.
That is a hard one. With respect to, I guess, the question is about racism, historical and current context and curriculum. I don't think anybody can deny that racism exists. It exists on many, many levels for anyone, any culture. We've all experienced it. My ancestors came from Ireland, where they were shoved onto coffin boats and eventually made their way here. I mean, we all have that story. But there are other things too. Ageism, sexism. We as a community have a long way to go. We've come a long way. And that's hopeful. With respect to the curriculum, of course, like any other aspect of educating our children to be successful in the world they're going to step into, of course we have to teach them about it. We have to teach them that it exists on all its different levels for all different cultures and colors and anything there.
We are working on that. It's been an ongoing task for years now, and I think we're making progress. One of the more recent one is a complete review of the curricula and the textbooks that our children are exposed to make sure that there's nothing in there that is teaching them racism, if you will, or teaching them to be racist. Showing them that all cultures are valuable, all people are valued, and removing any comments that would demean or dismiss other people.
Thank you. This is a difficult topic, and it's also difficult to go last because I've heard a lot of really great answers up till now. So I'm going to pile on to a couple of things. One, policy is definitely not enough, and talking about how we want to stop racism is not enough. We have to take action. We have to live it. We have to show our students and our community that we live it every day, that we believe it. That we're all learning to be better and more inclusive, and just lead by example. So that is one area of importance. And also, as stated, the curriculum does need to be set and consistent across the entire district. I do see many areas of curriculum where it is not consistent today that I would like to see that. And while I do believe that the school board has been working on this for a long time, I think we need to accelerate this and be able to produce something tangible that we can share. Obviously, the appetite is high right now for this updated curriculum, and so we don't want to miss an opportunity to really educate and share with our students. And show that we can be better, right? Sandy, what you said about the people choosing to stay remote is quite alarming. And we have a lot of work to do to make people feel welcome at our schools.
So one thing that I just loved about the Northshore School District is that they are very conscientious of other people's backgrounds, especially in the English department. One of my favorite books I read was called Things Fall Apart, and it's from the perspective of an African man. From Africa. And, as I graduated from school here and went on to the University of Washington, I experienced a lot more of that. I actually took a class in Law, Societies, and Justice and was educated myself much more on the issues of racism, particularly within, say, critical race theory. So I can say I really do understand what it's like, what the issues are, even though I may not be a different skin color. Recently there was a Senate bill passed 5044, and it was about teaching racism to teachers. There will be a race-based curriculum coming to North Shore. I guarantee it. And what I propose is that it is evidence-based and is age-appropriate. And it doesn't just cover race, but all sorts of people. I took another poll of how many students are LGBTQ in our community. 23% reported to me that they were. I myself am, and I wouldn't have been able to say that 20 years ago today if it wasn't for that. Excuse me. And so making sure that we're conscientious, that we're teaching all students all perspectives, but also keep it the curriculum so that they can make their own decisions about what's best for their life and what's best for other people's life in a respectful manner.
Okay, so we're running short on time. We can do closing statements quickly, but I'm not sure if we'll have time for audience questions. Do any of you feel very strongly about doing your closing statement, or do you feel like maybe we could do some audience questions instead?
What is the audience?
But yeah, that's what I thought the audience would want. So we did an opening statement, and you've got to get a lot of stuff out there. This person wrote, Students with IEPs, individualized education plans, have been underlooked during this past school year due to online learning. Many of their IEP goals and objectives were not met due to the lack of resources and time, which has led them to falling behind. As students are being evaluated for an IEP, how will you be supporting these students as they begin to transition to online learning? And I assume as they begin to transition to in-person learning as well.
Right. That's an excellent question, whoever said that. Thank you for that question. I know we touched on it a little bit, but it's very important, so I'd love to elaborate more on my previous answers. I've always considered myself a big advocate for mental health and for these students who have IEPs and 504 plans. Once again, I've had a 504 plan myself, and when I was in high school. And it's very difficult to overcome these issues, but with the right support, you can. I think that as we move back into in-person learning, we'll be able to provide easier access to getting the needs, the help that these people need, especially when someone mentioned it earlier that some students have trouble even obtaining IEPs. I believe that was Fry over there because they're high achieving. So acknowledging that not everyone who needs help has low scores, for example. I think that I was looking at my notes and I lost it, so forgive me. But I think I'll yield my time for the rest of the night.
Okay, this is a good question, and I think as we return to school, similar to what we talked about on learning loss, right, evaluating where they are currently so that we can make sure that we provide the catch-up services needed. And going forward, I think the fact that they have individualized plans is excellent, and we need to be meeting our commitments for that. I think there's some things that we could look at also about the accessibility of services, the consistency that they're delivered, and the ease it is for parents to be able to access them. I've heard many parents come to me saying that it was difficult for them to get made eligible for the services, or that they had to move schools in order for their child to receive the services. And I think that makes it really difficult for them. Also, an area that is important to me is what they call gen ed time. Sometimes students that cannot participate in like the regular class curriculum throughout the day, they go in to have specialized classes, which is good to meet their needs, but they also need to have time with their peers, and really with their peers, and with the teachers need to be prepared and have the resources they need to be able to teach everyone in the class, at least for some part of the time. We do not want to have a student in the back of the class with the parent teacher kind of being shuffled off to the side and treated differently. I think the point of the gen ed time is to have them be with their peers and be getting part of the regular curriculum, and we want to make sure that that's really happening also.
Well, thank you for the question. The special education services is huge now, as always, really. But the Northshore School District has a couple of schools now who are, what's the word I'm looking for? Pardon? Well, yes, inclusionary, but they're also very highly recognized and applauded for the work that they're doing. They are a standard now for the state. So inclusion is something that the district has been working on for quite some time and trying to spread it across the district. That's one aspect. With respect to transitioning our students back to in-person, I think for me this speaks a great deal to our general work and motion toward individualized education. We need every student to be working with the teacher, in this case, a special education teacher or the general teacher when they're going into an inclusive environment, but working one-on-one and finding out exactly what they need, working with them on the IEP and how to best address their needs, individualized education, I think in particular for our special education students, is what we need to focus on.
Trying to decide exactly where I want to start on this one here. I've heard a lot of the same things that I want to say about ease of access, accessibility. I know family friends who are neighboring school districts whose kids are on IEPs, who kids require special services. And I know for a fact that those neighboring school districts were open for those students in person throughout the pandemic, and it was done safely. Well, Northshore provided a fraction of that in-person service. And most of those kids, most of our students have fallen behind because of that, because they don't have that interaction. To get them caught back up, it's about getting that interaction going again. Looking at the IEPs, making sure that these are achievable objectives. Those objectives are appropriate for where they're at and where they need to go for their next steps, and working them through them, not just passing them on. Making sure that they're truly achieving those and getting the support from all aspects, working as a team between the parents and the teachers and any other specialists or resources or other people that are required to be a part of that.
A lot of education jargon. So IEP, Individual Education Plan, is a student that has been identified as having greater needs than what we typically see as a general education student. The other term is inclusionary practices. That's the idea that those students can receive that education and those services in the general education classroom. And we are working very hard to increase the students that are in our general education classrooms. We have several schools that are full inclusion schools, and we are working with the goal of every student being at their neighborhood school, no matter what services they need. 95% of students in Washington State that have an IEP have an average IQ or higher, and yet their graduation rates are abysmal. We need to stop thinking of these students as less than or not capable. They are capable, and some of them are very highly capable. We need to work on our students being our students. They are not the labeled highly capable special ed, bilingual, EL. They are all of our students, and our teachers need to see them as their students. 11 seconds. That's where I'm going to stop then.
The first question that popped in my head once I heard this question is like, if students still asking about it, it means that they didn't find support and help. So my guess, because I don't have experience with such type of kids, and I think that it should be teamwork with the parents who have these kids, and they have to work with teachers to make sure that these kids receive not like the same, they're going to be treated the same way as the normal kids. And I was thinking about it, like in my school, like probably 2 years younger, there was a class with a kid. We were older, we did understand that he had some special needs, but the way I saw the kids were treating him, that was equal. He was equal to them, because no one was putting that much attention to make him different. So my thought is that if you treat them the same way, of course with a specialist and with extra help, but if you consider him equal, he's going to be equal, and it's not going to be a problem then.
So I agree with a lot of what Sandy said, so I'm not even going to go into that. But I just wanted to hit a couple points. Any student that was exited from their IEP, their individualized education plan, during the last year and a half, they should be reinstated, because I've heard stories of this happening, and that just can't be right. One of the problems, I think, is that special education isn't handled centrally for some reason in the district. There are 4 regions, east, west, north, south. There are 4 different people who are like director of special education for each region, and then they answer to the regional assistant superintendent. So there's a lot of inequity going on. Like what's happening over in Bothell is totally different than what's happening in Woodinville in terms of, who gets an IEP or how it is implemented. And that is, I think, a big issue that we can resolve fairly easily. So I would like to see that happen. And secondly, I would like to see the federal government fully fund the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, passed like in the 1970s and still not fully funded. That would, I think, do a lot towards being able to fully service all of our students with disabilities.
My platform has always been students first, and I one of the things that I've heard from families that have IEPs is they don't feel their voices are heard, and I think that's a big problem. That if you've got a parent struggling, trying to get their child the education they deserve, and they don't feel heard, that can bring in an added additional level of frustration that I think we should be able to resolve. I think, I don't purport to be an education expert. I don't think anyone on our school board probably is. We're people, we represent the community. So the first thing I would do is talk to the teachers who are working with these children. They have their boots on the ground. They know what these children need, and we need to listen to our teachers as to what they believe can help this particular child, because there's no one size fits all, especially for children on an IEP. Very unique learning challenges, I'm sure, across the board. And so when I'm elected to school board, one of the biggest things I think we need to work on is having that community involvement, making sure our voices are heard, making sure there's an advocate for our children. In the law practice, when a child's involved in any kind of a court case, they're assigned an advocate. Our school district our school board should be our advocates for our children, advocates for our parents. I take that job very seriously. I've done child support enforcement in the past, and unfortunately as adults sometimes we get tunnel vision and we think we know what's best, and we forget to ask the kids, especially our older kids, what they need and what they think are solutions. So I'm an absolute advocate for students first and listening to their voice.
There are 21% of students in Northshore that are identified as kids with disabilities on an IEP or a 504. That's a big chunk of the population of kids in Northshore. I don't have a perfect solution. I am not an expert in this issue, but I have been a kid on an IEP. I am a parent to a child in special education, and this is something our community needs to come together and solve together. Not just the board, not the superintendent, not some teachers, not another task force, not another committee. We need to come together. We need to listen and to hear what all voices have to say about this and find solutions that will work. Work with the budget we have, with the limited funding that we have to address this issue, and really try to represent and do what is best for this population of kids so they can succeed and thrive.
Yeah, this is a tough one to go last because there's so much I agree with. So let me just say that being a school board member, it's helpful to understand the tools in your tool belt. And it's a really dry subject, but one of the most important tools you have is policy, which is why I just made a proposal to track what's called least restrictive environment in our policies. So this is a measure that is directly tied with inclusionary practices. So the idea is we are evolving as a district away from having students receiving special education services siloed off in a portable or another classroom or the back of the room. But how do we know it's happening fast enough? How do we know it's happening across all our different special education programs? Not every district has a behavioral special education program. We do. We have lots of different programs, and we need to make sure they're all making progress. So by tracking this percentage, Leota, for example, Leota Middle School is one of the schools that is adding these inclusionary practices, pairing with the Herring Center for Inclusive Education at University of Washington. They cut the statistics, so you measure how much time a student is in different types of environments. That's what LRE stands for, least restrictive environment. It's a percentage. They cut theirs in half, right? This is very measurable, to Amy's point. And so by putting this in policy, and we review our outcomes every year, we'll be able to track and make sure it's fast enough.
All right, we are at 9:03, so thank you all for addressing some difficult topics in 90 seconds. Thank you all for coming. Thanks again to the Grange for hosting us. And you all can go home now, so have a good night.
Thanks for watching.